Because if you say, hey, here's our goal. We've agreed to have this current lifestyle that we currently have. Let's do that. And even more, right? And we want to travel and we want to see our grandkids. What does that cost? Right? We both agreed that this is what we want to do. What is that going to cost? Are we able to afford that? Say we both stop working. What assets do we have now? These are very like thought-provoking questions that can be like, oh crap, right? We are not on the same page. Welcome back to The Donkey
and the Bee,
where men are jackasses
and women are biatches,
where we work together to build an extraordinary life.
Tune in to up your game in your marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances. Welcome back to another episode of The Donkey and the Bee with your hosts, Brett and Laura Shakavis, where we talk all things marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances. And we are coming at you today speaking about finances because it's something that we love to talk about, something that we know a lot of people don't like talking about, which is why we love talking about it.
Well, we're talking about how to get rich today with your spouse. And so many couples that I know are just not on the same page with money. They have separate dreams and goals for the short term and the long term. And they're not on the same page with these things. So they're not able to get an actionable plan to get to early retirement, financial freedom, have the life that they want after their kids are out of the house because they're just back and forth spending, saving. I want to work. I don't want you to work. Spend more time with the kids. No, I need to be at work. All these kind of things. It's like, let's talk about how to get on the same page with your spouse so you can hit early retirement, hit the financial freedom goal.
I think a lot of couples don't necessarily or haven't pushed past that uncomfortable point in their marriage about talking about finances. I think that there's an uncomfortableness. I think there's this like weight. I think that's on a lot of people's shoulders. They want to talk about it, but they don't know how to talk about it, especially if you're the saver and your spouse is a spender. I think you're uncertain how to approach it. I mean, I'm a woman and I feel like I hear a lot of other women talk about like buying all this stuff and like hiding stuff from their husband. There's like a joke of the doormat saying like, hey, Amazon guy, like deliver my package on the side of the house so my husband can see. Like there's this like aura of like, hey, let's hide our finances from each other and just kind of ignore and just, it's not there. It's okay. It's a strange thing. I feel like there's no upfront honesty about finances in a lot of marriages.
Yeah. Well, even on the other side, a lot of times you'll have maybe the husband in charge of the finances and the wife or the other spouse has no idea what's really going on. Are we making enough money? Are we saving any money? How much do we have? Do we even have a rainy day fund? Is there anything in the 401k or retirement accounts? Like, how are we going to get to a place at end of life to actually afford how to die? Like, a lot of times there's just no communication on either side.
We definitely have a different perspective on this topic, I think, because of the business that we're in. So we own and operate assisted livings, and I think that we see a lot of end of life. We see a lot of death, but we also see how expensive it is to get to that point. And so I think that's why we like talking about this, because we're very aware of how expensive it is to get old and how expensive it is to die. And that's another thing people don't like talking about is death, and that's inevitable. I'm going to PSA here. We are all going to die. So let's just get over that awkward hump, right?
But I've seen it cost $1 million for people to die.
Yes.
Like
I think people are unaware of that.
And again, the life expectancy is pushing longer and longer and longer. By the time we get to that place, it's well over 100. By the time our kids get in there, I mean, they're talking about 120-year life cycles, pretty standard. So that kind of leads into this conversation for tonight. How do you get on the same page with your spouse? And I mean, do you have a plan to at least afford to die, let alone afford to live an extraordinary life and have early retirement and things like that? So we've talked about the spender, the saver. I also see a lot of times you have one spouse who wants to work. They're a hustler. They're trying to pick up the overtime, where the other spouse is not on the same page. They're like, I want the family time. I want you home with the kids. I want you sharing in these roles and duties and helping me be, the taxi driver for the kids, taking them all over the place, right? And granted, there's for sure family priority, right? That's super important. But I think the conversation for today is prioritizing and getting at least a conversation out to your spouse on, hey, you know what? We have multiple things that are priorities in our life. but how are we going to get to this place where we can financially afford the life that we've always wanted, right? Because our kids, they're going to be with us for a short amount of time, right? And there's some definite precious moments when they're young, and then they get to teenage years and it's a little bit different, and then they're out of the house and it's just us, right? It's just this relationship. Did we even get to this place, or did we blow it and get a divorce already because we never had these conversations about the money, about the time, about these priorities that we have?
We are on the same page, Brett and I, because we've had multiple conversations about finances. And in the beginning, when we were young, we had the conversations and it was awkward and it was immature, I think, the way that we approached it, because we were like early 20s. We weren't really thinking of like our deathbed. That wasn't even in our sight. We were thinking of the now and the present. And so I think a lot of individuals think of what can make me happy now instead of what's going to make me happy or successful in the future. And so I think it's being future-minded. And we've talked about this before on this podcast, is choosing your hard, right? Are you going to choose your hard now while you're young and you have the energy? Or are you going to choose your hard later when you're older and maybe not have as much energy and drive? So we are choosing our hard now. And I think that's the best route to go, because you have your mind, you have your physical body, you have all these things still intact and still ready to roll. And it's easier to choose to do those hard things now than do them later when you're 70 or 80 years old.
So whether you're the saver and your spouse is the spender, whether you are the family man and your spouse is the overtime person, or whether you're like, I'm just driven to make more income, right? Not necessarily save it, right? I'm high income, but not high profit, not high savings. There's a disconnect in all of these things between you and your spouse. And I want to talk about how we structured a conversation that was at least easy enough for us to come back to multiple times and revisit throughout the different stages and seasons of our life in order to kind of reprioritize and get on the same page with, hey, here's our financial goals, how it ties in with our family goals, and here's realistically like kind of baby steps all the way through the different various stages of life. So here's a structure that I think is a very easy way to have this conversation and get on the same page with your spouse. If you have different now priorities, right? You're in this stage of life now where you both want different things, and you both really probably want the same things, right? You want income, you want a job that you love, you want to spend time with your kids, you want to save for retirement, right? You'll want all those things. But if it's like, hey, my number one priority is this, and your number one priority is totally something different, right? If it's hard work and saving versus, hey, family time, or maybe you just want to spend all the money, or you just want to sit around and really do nothing, right? We got to get on the same page. So this is how we did it, is we started talking about the end in mind. Like, let's start with the last stage of our life here, right? The deathbed. And really, because I want to get to a place where we both have the same goal. Right now, we're having this conversation because we have different priorities. But when you have your deathbed, right, it's pretty easy to be like, hey, everyone really wants the same kind of thing, right? No one wants to die in a gross hospital. They don't want to be in one of those big, smelly nursing homes, right? Like, you want to have the financial means and your family around and your grandkids, right? That's how everyone wants to die. And I think it's pretty easy to start from that perspective because pretty much everyone wants the same kind of thing. And then from there, now you've said, hey, we have a future goal. We both want the same thing, right? Our deathbed stage of life. Then you just start working closer and closer and closer, right? Here's the objective, is that you find what is my shared goal, right? We have the same number one priority in this, and try and get as close to your current stage of life as possible. And now you identified your gap, right? It's between the stage I am now and, whether it's, whether I'm 40s or 50s or 60s, just hitting retirement or post-retirement, whatever it is. Now, how do we then identify and solve that problem? We have at least identified this gap. Here's our priority where we're at now in the stage of life. And up until this place, right, we both want the same thing over here. Whether it's, we want to retire roughly around the same time. We want to travel. We want to spend time with our grandkids and things like that. We both have that same line in the sand. Now, how do we take some actionable items and maybe some sacrificing both sides to be able to get to that place?
So you started the latest point in life with your deathbed. Let's push a little bit closer to where our current state of life is. And that would be probably retirement. I think when you ask people about retirement, they all kind of have the same answer. It's all, I'm not going to have a job. I'm going to maybe sell all my assets. A lot of people like to do that and then travel. Some people want to, accumulate their assets and travel and then spend time with their grandkids. But I think there's kind of a top 5 things that a lot of people like to do with retirement. So I think that's some common ground that people can find to start off how they're going to build their wealth as a couple.
So like you said, with retirement, right? It's very easy to get on the same page. And you may say, okay, as a couple, we've decided to hit these kind of things, right? Here's our retirement goals. We want to spend time with our grandkids. We want to travel a certain amount of time per year. We want to have bigger trips, international trips. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to just sell everything and buy an RV and travel and do that kind of thing. But every one of these things has a budget. So if you're expecting to live at your current lifestyle, like what are you spending now, right? Are you spending, 60 grand a year, 80 grand a year, 6 figures or more? Are you able to keep that going? If you have the spouse that is the spender and they just love spending money, it's their thing. They're going out, they're buying new stuff all the time and hitting all the fancy restaurants and things like that. Is their expectation that they are not going to cut their budget at the end of life in the retirement stage? Do they think that, hey, we're just going to keep spending like this? This is my lifestyle. Because if you say, hey, here's our goal, we've agreed to have this current lifestyle that we currently have. Let's do that and even more, right? And we want to travel and we want to see our grandkids. What does that cost, right? We both agreed that this is what we want to do. What is that going to cost? Are we able to afford that? Say we both stop working. What assets do we have now? These are very thought-provoking questions that can be like, oh crap, right? We are not on the same page. My spouse over here, the saver, has been bugging me for years to start saving more and investing, and I'm the spender. And if I, as the spender, want to hit this type of lifestyle at 65 to 75, well, you know what? I look at the trajectory we're at now. We save almost nothing, right? We invest almost nothing. Then it's a really provoking conversation that we can have here and be like, well, you know what? We've both agreed. Here's where we want to be. Now let's work backwards from there, right? If we're going to have this type of budget post-retirement, how much income do we need? How many assets do we need to provide? What's our cash flow look like, right? For us, we're in real estate. It's how many properties times a certain amount of cash flow do we need? How many doors times this, and we can replace our income. And it's kind of the same kind of thing. How do we get to that place where we can afford what we both agreed on? If we're living in a space now where we don't agree, I want to spend, you want to save. I want to work hard, you want me home with the kids, right? What does it look like 10 or 15 or 20 years from when we have a shared goal? And then let's math it from there. Can we afford that shared goal? And then it's just now we have identified a problem here, right? We both want this one thing, but we're not on a track at all to get there. So let's come up with a plan, right? How do we get there? And I think it does require a lot of sacrifice from both sides, because it's not like we're going to drop everything and go towards this one financial goal. There's balance, right? We have to have the family things. We have to have days off. We have to have fun money, all these kind of things. But at least this gets you to a place with your spouse where you can have the conversation and have clarity of mind. You'd be like, well, you know what? Here's what we both agreed on. So now we need to work a plan to get there.
So it all sounds perfect, but I think that there are certain circumstances or seasons that come into play in your life that can kind of, I don't want to say derail because that's not the correct word, but kind of maybe get you off track a little bit in a way. So for example, there could be seasons in your life when you have younger kids where you're really focusing on the family, you're focusing on spending time with your kids, maybe traveling a little bit. That may not, you may not be saving as much or purchasing assets or building that wealth to the trajectory to where you want. Or there could be maybe an illness in the family. Maybe your mom gets sick or your dad gets sick. Something happens that kind of, pivots your focus toward that certain thing. There are certain things and seasons and obstacles that you go through in your life that can kind of sidetrack you. But what's good about having this conversation beforehand is you both have that common goal and you both know that this certain season I'm going through in my life, yes, it may be distracting me from that goal, but I still have that goal. I know this is just a season that it's going to be, bright and sunny. It's not always winter every time. So I think having that certain goal and knowing that you're still, walking toward that goal, even through that season, is very important.
Yeah, you're talking about times when you are reprioritizing. And it's super common when you have young kids and babies and stuff, right? And the mom wants to stay home from when they're newborn to maybe when they're like in kindergarten or something, right? And there's a lot of sacrifice financially probably in those times. If you go from 2 incomes back to 1, but if you at least have that conversation, you say, hey, you know what? We've decided we're going to put our family first for this season of life, or maybe we're going to move closer to grandma or something like that. Or, you know what? You're going to stay home and be with the kids, but we've come to an agreement where you're going to try and get a side hustle, right? You're going to do something to bring in some extra income for the family. Or perhaps like use this season and be like, hey, we're kind of taking it chill. We're working with the family. We're spending time with the family a lot. But maybe we're investing in ourselves. This is where we start learning how to buy assets and learning a niche and those kind of things, so that when that season does change and transition, it's like, hey, okay, we've planned for this, we've budgeted for this, and now it's time to switch the priorities. Now we are going after our financial goals and we're aligned. But at least during these seasons of disagreement with potentially 1 or 2 spouses, you've at least had that conversation. Be like, all right, well, you know what? We both have these separate priorities, and it's just for this amount of time, and then we're going to hit it again. So we don't get to that place where we're dying broke and, being in one of those gross, smelly facilities, right? Our goals are to travel and retire early and do all those kind of things. And, life is messy and it's not perfect. So when things are aligning, then, man, you just agree and you just run after and you hit it as hard as you can.
Well, thanks for joining us on another episode of The Donkey and the Bee. We hope that this hit home for you, that you got some gold nuggets here. And as you all know, we do not run any ads on the show. So the one thing that we ask for you is to share this. I know that there may be some people that they need to hear this. So please share the show, and we will see you on the next one.